Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and today we are taking a look at 4 strong league starters for the upcoming 3.11 Harvest League. This week is some of the most exciting time in the league cycle of Path of Exile as we all plan out our league starters, as we all debate theory crafting on the new passive tree, the new itemization changes, and new skill gems. And we all eagerly anticipate for the league launch day when all of our hopes and dreams will either be realized or smashed with the new league launch. With all that hype surrounding us, we've got 4 strong league starters that we would like to put in front of you to consider as strong league starters to get you from level 1 into maps over the course of your opening couple of play sessions. For those of you who are new to the channel, you can of course like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future video discussions just like this one, and we've got a lot more coming with Harvest League. And of course, if you're a veteran of the channel, then you know all of the various forum guides that we are going to be referencing today are going to be included down below in the video description. A few disclaimers for us today as we get our discussion started. First off, a league starter does not mean that we are projecting the strongest meta build that will emerge from the upcoming 3.11 Harvest League. That is not what a league starter is designed to do, so don't hear what I'm not saying. League starters are meant to do a couple of things. First off, they're meant to push you through the 10-act story. If a build can't get you through the 10-act story reliably, then it is not going to be a good starter. That means if you're looking at a build that uses a skill, maybe in mapping, but then doesn't tell you how to actually level with it throughout the 10-act story campaign, that's probably not a good starter build for you because you're going to have to do all of your theory crafting getting you to maps. League starters need to push you through the story. Starters are also meant to push you into maps, not just get you to maps, but push you through maps as you start to build a pool of maps that you will then springboard into the true endgame of Path of Exile. Starters are also meant to offer you options for endgame progression. A starter is not a good starter if it gets you through the story into maps, but then doesn't give you a direction of how you can grow your build with currency, crafting, or changes to your build as you accrue more levels. Lastly, starters are meant to be free from specific uniques. You might eventually use some uniques and see some options for uniques that you'll want to keep in mind. And we've got another video that's coming out here in the next day or two that's going to recommend specific uniques as you level using different particular builds. But for the most part, starters are meant to be free from required specific uniques. Sure, there are uniques that might augment your build or speed up your starter, but a starter isn't a starter as soon as it requires a specific unique to drop for you because you're not guaranteed to have it from the league start. All right, the last disclaimer is that I personally recommend starters that have accompanying guides which are new player friendly, meaning if you are a new player to Path of Exile this league, or maybe this is your first league start, maybe you've never had a league start, you've always played in the middle of a league, or you've never been around for the hype cycle that is a new league start, I want to recommend for you build guides that are going to help you with mechanics and terminology and familiarity so that way you can read through a guide and quickly be able to access the information or the answers to questions that you might have while you're using that guide for your league starter.
They were right to fear me.
A simple job, I was told.
The very first recommended starter guide that we've got for today is ShakCentral's Vortex for Dummies. This is a beautifully well-written guide. It is modeled after Enki's Arc Witch, so if you've heard people describe Enki's Arc Witch as the best written guide in all of Path of Exile forum history, I would put ShakCentral's up there as number 2. It is simply glorious. You can see above my slightly balding forehead, there is a beautiful, well-written table of contents that will allow you to navigate exactly to the section of the guide that you need. For instance, let's say you're leveling and you get a Tabula Rasa or you get a Wanderlust. Boom, there is a section on how to level with twink gear, how to level with gear that will push you further faster. By comparison, there's a leveling section on how to level if you don't have any twink gear, if you're just league starting and you've got nothing in your stash tab and nothing on your character yet. If you're unfamiliar with how Vortex or how dot builds work, damage over time builds, then this particular build is going to walk you through exactly how you can scale Vortex's damage, its duration, and its quality of life features. We recently featured ShakCentral's Vortex for Dummy build on our featured Build of the Week discussion series, and you can view that video. That's linked down below in the video description if you'd like a full-on walkthrough of his build guide.
You can't own a life. Not a deer's, not a rabbit's, and not mine.
The second guide that we're recommending for a strong league start is Remi Caster's Toxicrain Pathfinder. There are so many things that make this build great, including the fact that it's actually starting out of the Ranger. One of the misconceptions about league starters is that Rangers are automatically a terrible idea as a league start because they're a relatively squishy class, at least in terms of their placement on the passive tree. Because of that, not a lot of players will league start as a Ranger class, whether that's a Raider, whether that's a Pathfinder, or whether that's a Deadeye. This means that a whole bunch of players league start with other classes and then sell uniques and rares that are usable by bow users early on simply because those classes don't want to keep that gear for themselves. Toxicrain is a terrific skill to level with and to progress with, which means that you can both level with it throughout the story as well as use it as you push into maps. This isn't a skill that you're going to have to give up when it's time to take down big time endgame bosses. You can push Conquerors and take down Cirrus with Toxicrain as well. Now, while some players might say, oh, but Iron, Pathfinder, you have to manage your flasks. It's the Flask Finder ascendancy. While it's true that the Pathfinder is the flask-oriented ascendancy in Path of Exile, there is a misconception that simply because you are gaining duration and power from your flasks, you will then have to manage your flasks more. The reality is that you actually have to manage your flasks less on a Pathfinder because of that added duration and the bonus power that you're getting from your flasks. Quick example, if you have a flask that maintains its duration for 5 seconds. That means once every 5 seconds on a normal character that's not a Pathfinder, you'll want to repress that flask button in order to keep its effects alive for you. If you've got a Flask Finder or a Pathfinder that doubles your flask duration, then instead of having 5 seconds on your flask, you've got 10 seconds on your flask. You also have the possibility that using that flask simply won't use a charge, meaning you won't run out of charges as much whether you're mapping or bossing. This means while the regular character class will have to press that 5-second flask twice over the course of 10 seconds, you as a Pathfinder have only had to press it once. I don't understand where this misconception comes about that Pathfinder is this really bad class for flasks, because it's actually exceptional. Early on in a league, you can get very high quality flasks for very, very cheap. Purchase them off of other players because, again, players aren't necessarily looking to use and abuse the power that comes from Pathfinder, and you can be the recipient of all kinds of currency simply because you chose to league start with a Pathfinder and everybody else is going to swap over to it once they have some currency under their belt.
I fought, wept, and bled for God and the Order.
Our third recommended strong league starter is Moosseolini's Holy Relics Guardian. Now, this is a build that we have featured in the past during our featured weekly build discussion series, and it is a build that is explicitly getting some buffs for the 3.11 harvest cycle. When I personally played this build, Holy Relic Guardian was simply silly with how cheap it was and with how easy it was to scale. I spent a couple X, I seriously mean by a couple, I think it was 2 or maybe 1.5 on a 6-link staff, and then needed the required unique helmet for this particular build to push endgame, and away I went and I was able to take down Cirrus. The rest of my gear was veritably trash. Like, you could have just destroyed it. In fact, I think I did destroy like all of that gear except the 6-link when it went to standard. This build is so strong. Summon Holy Relic itself is a massive, massive damage source that will maintain its damage, allowing you to maintain your mobility while you're bossing. Do you like having the ability to have Fortify consistently? Do you like the ability to make sure that you're constantly regenerating HP? Do you like the ability to have reduced physical damage taken? Do you like being able to have the ability to simply animation cancel because a slam is coming at you at any point in time and it won't disrupt your DPS? Do you like being able to repeatedly farm specific bosses at league start, whether that's the Labyrinth, at Ziri, or even Shaper, because that is where the most money is to be made early on with boss kills? If any of that at all sounds appealing to you, then I would highly recommend Moosseolini's Holy Relics Guardians to you. If you're interested in a full walkthrough of this particular build, we of course have got the video reference down below for your enjoyment if you want to see what the gameplay looks like as well as what the full build guide looks like. But the update for Harvest is relatively straightforward and simple. Overall, we're going to have 5% less damage, 6% more health. We get additional spell block, less attack block, and Static Strike is back as our activator of the Holy Relics Nova attack. The good news about Static Strike is that you can attack with Static Strike, which activates your Holy Relics Nova attack, and then you can stay mobile until you need to refresh the duration of your Holy Relics Nova attack by once again hitting Static Strike. There's also room in the build if you want to start to use some war cries in order to augment your novas. So there's lots and lots of room for improvement in this build and room for testing if you'd like to tweak something and make the build specifically yours. If any player asks me over the next couple of days if they're looking for a specific build to take down bosses early on a budget, then this is the one I personally am going to recommend.
I would have died for my Templar brothers. Every single one.
The fourth and final build that we are going to recommend for today's discussion is 1337 Fun's Tanky Spark Inquisitor. While Moosseolini's Guardian focuses on being able to take down bosses rather than clear speed, this Tanky Spark Inquisitor focuses on clear speed over on top of bossing. 1337 Fun does a great job with his FAQ and with responding to questions on his build guide thread, so would highly recommend that if you've got questions, you check out his build guide. If you have never played Spark, one of the reasons why you want to play Spark early on in a league on an Inquisitor is to simply build up your currency and to run a particular pool of maps very, very early on, either farming divination cards or farming particular layouts that are then going to allow you to spam the particular league mechanic that is available that league. For us, that means if you're looking to become a farmer and harvest as much as you can in your garden, I would recommend using this Tanky Spark Inquisitor. The speed is going to allow you to push through maps very, very quickly and therefore get growth cycles going in your garden. And because it's tanky, it means you're actually going to be able to survive in those garden encounters where you're taking on larger and bigger and scarier mobs than maybe what you're encountering in your maps. Spark can be used to level with, which means those of you who are looking to play a particular build that uses the same skill in the end game as what it uses while it's leveling throughout the 10-act story campaign, this is a fantastic build for you. There are threshold jewels that are going to make Spark an optional change or a modified version of the build. It's up to you whether or not you want to use those. It adds power, it adds quality of life, or if you'd rather not invest in that threshold jewel or another threshold jewel comes up as a more pricey option for you to sell in order to invest back into your character, you can do that as well. It's not all fun and sun based off of the 3.11 patch notes. We did lose some crit multi across the board, and that's just true for every build that was using crit. One of the things that makes a tanky Spark Inquisitor so dang tanky is that you can actually make your Spark freeze enemies. This is a fantastic defensive mechanic, and if you're not simply blowing everything up because you need a bunch of crit multi, which you don't have access to early on during a league start, you can definitely use that cold damage in order to freeze and chill enemies that are near you to keep you alive. The layers of offensive mechanics that are presented to you through a tanky Spark Inquisitor like this one allow you to quickly clear content, and the defensive mechanics of a tanky Spark Inquisitor allow you to stay alive and stop donating 10% of your XP every map. Well, thanks so much to everybody for watching and participating in today's discussion about 4 strong league starters for the upcoming 3.11 Harvest League. I'd love to hear down below in the comments what your league starter is going to be. These are the 4 that I am considering. I am going to pick at least one of these to league start and move on with. You guys can guess down below which one you think I'm going to be league starting with. And as always, I hope that 3.11 Harvest League is the league that a Mirror of Calandra drops for you as you are league starting with one of these 4 strong league starters.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.